issues at hand. That means a civil, contextualized conversation with perspective.
Tonight, we're tracking damaging storms, even possible tornadoes along the East Coast. And an NFL player's skin cancer scare serves as a warning to other African-American men. Plus, a shocking loss for the U.S. women's team at the World Cup. What went wrong on the CBS Evening News?
It's a political witch hunt, clear as day.
I think it's helped his chances for being reelected.
It's hard for the other candidates to take a stand one way or the other. It makes it hard then to get stay focused on the issues.
Too many people running, but I hope some of them get eliminated because he got 50%.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. Former President Donald Trump continues to criticize the charges against him in the January 6th case. While on the campaign trail over the weekend, he lashed out at special counsel Jack Smith, calling him deranged. He also posted on social media, quote, "If you go after me, I'm coming after you." The Department of Justice has asked the judge to limit the information that Trump can share about this case. So for more, let's bring in Bob Costa, Finn Gomez, and Anthony Salvanto. Robert is CBS News Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent. Finn is CBS News Political Director, and Anthony is CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys. Anthony, I'll come to you in a moment. I want to start with you, Bob and Finn, about this latest Trump with the Trump indictments. Bob, I know you've been covering the legal case of this as well as the political one. Tell us about what this protective order would do. I mean, this is a former president who's under indictment who likes to talk a lot about what he thinks he knows.
Former President Trump continues to rage against the special counsel, the judge in this case, and others involved. And his lawyer, John Lauro, over the weekend on Face the Nation and on other programs, said that the former president, should have the right to continue to speak out on First Amendment grounds, that he has the right to have free speech, especially as a candidate for federal office. But this coincides with an ongoing grand jury investigation at the federal level. And the prosecutors have expressed in a court filing their alarm, frankly, about Trump and whether he could be pressuring witnesses or disrupting the case in some way by making public statements about the case. This is all going to be adjudicated in the coming days. There was a 5 p.m. deadline tonight. Our expectation, based on our reporting, is that Trump is going to argue he's going to continue to speak out without much to constrain him in any way.
And that's what I found so fascinating about this protective order, and we're seeing this in some other cases, is that as he is undergoing all of these court challenges or court cases, he's also actively running for president and continuing to be out there on the campaign trail. I want to play a little bit of what we've heard from voters over the weekend, Finn, as the former president was campaigning.
It's just a witch hunt. They don't go after the administration in office now like that.
The rest of the world knows it's all a lie.
Every time something's going bad for Biden, they do something more to Trump to try to bring him down.
But he's got my vote. Indict him again.
And Finn, I know you've been on the campaign trail in Iowa recently, too. I mean, does this echo what you've been hearing from voters in reaction to the indictment?
Yes. I mean, you are seeing this. It's a continuation of his strength that he is politically where he is right now in this cycle. You're seeing that the former president remains the front runner, and if anything, as these investigations and indictments continue, you see his political strength increase in these early states. In Iowa, the voters who may not have supported him after last year's midterms are now actually circling the wagons around him.
And what's really interesting, Bob, is that you have Mike Pence out there as well, campaigning for president. He's obviously a key figure in the January 6th case. And he really seems to be kind of unbound, unrestricted, feeling like he can speak his mind on this. I want to, I don't think we have the sound actually, but over the weekend, he told a voter to essentially read the Constitution. He did what he needed to do. What do you make of how we've seen Mike Pence over the past week?
It's a highly unusual situation to have a presidential candidate, a former vice president, running against his former boss, who's out of power but trying to get it back, all while the former boss is under investigation and the former vice president is a key witness in the investigation because of the pressure campaign that was put upon him. We've never seen anything like this before. Pence has always sought the presidency, even when he didn't run for it. I talked to him back in 2011, 2012, when he thought about running then, and he's always been someone with an eye on the White House, so it's not surprising he's running for the Republican nomination. But to do so against Trump, someone he was so loyal to for so long, he has been reluctant at times to take on Trump. But when he announced his campaign, he underscored his announcement by saying Trump doesn't follow the rule of law. And that has been a consistent message from Pence from day one. It's been difficult for Pence because many Republican voters still stand with Trump, as Finn was detailing. Trump remains the front runner. But Pence is going to continue to speak out and hope, in the same way former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie is doing, to carve out some space in the Republican Party where they can be an alternative who is a bit critical of Trump.
And I do want to talk a little bit more about this, but we are just getting news that Trump's legal team has argued for a much narrower protective order. So responding to what we were just talking about in terms of what the judge wanted. So we have that bit of information. Any idea of what this would possibly mean in this case?
Well, the big picture here is the Trump team is pushing back hard against special counsel Jack Smith and his concern. They're arguing they're going to continue to have their client and a federal candidate speak out. And this also comes back to the Trump strategy, which is to delay this proceeding. They don't want to see this judge be part of the case. They would like to see the location of the trial moved, possibly to West Virginia, though no legal expert believes that will happen. And they also would just like to see this kick down the road, because ultimately many Trump allies tell CBS News that if this trial is still ongoing during the 2024 presidential race and Trump's the winner next year, that this whole thing will fall apart. So delay is a central tenet of what they're up to.
Yeah, seeing this in other cases as well. Going back to Pence, he risks not making the debate stage. Let's listen to what he told Face the Nation over the weekend.
I think the American people want to see the most experienced and proven conservative on that stage. And frankly, I'm looking forward to the debate, not just with my former running mate, but with others in this party who are walking away from America's historic commitment as leader of the free world.
So, Finn, everything that Bob just described about this Mike Pence that we are seeing, at the end of the day, though, he still hasn't made the qualifications in terms of donations yet to make that stage. What does that suggest?
Well, a couple of things. It does suggest that his trajectory has some obstacles in front of him, and the obstacles that have existed since January 6, 2021, they're still there. However, speaking to close advisors to Pence, they feel confident, they say, that he will reach the debate stage. I think what you are seeing with Pence, I did get the opportunity to speak to him in Iowa during that Lincoln Day dinner in Iowa, and I saw a very sort of broken man. Frankly, he was tired and he looked fatigued, and you see that, you contrast that to him now with Face the Nation, with that interview with Major Garrett, and it's a different Pence. I think this is a Pence unleashed. I think you see more energy with him. What else does he have to lose? And I think there's more momentum with that. And I think, at least according to those Pence sources, they believe that he will get to that stage.
I mean, and Bob, you've covered him for a long time too. Do you expect that this is, he'll be able to break through with this, or is this just a case of, this is the moment that he's in?
His legal standing may ultimately be as important historically as his political standing. While it's interesting to see a former vice president mount a run for the nomination against the president he served alongside, for him to be this witness who has already sat for hours with the grand jury, as Pence was discussing with Major Garrett on Face the Nation over the weekend, the real question looming over Pence's campaign is not only will he make the debate stage, but will he be on that ultimate stage? Will he be on the stand testifying under oath against Trump should this case on January 6th go to trial?
Debates come and go, but that is a major legacy as we will see unfold, perhaps. Bob, Finn, thank you very much. We appreciate your time in reporting. And let's head over to Anthony Salvanto, because a new CBS poll is showing us what voters think about Trump's indictment in the January 6th case. Our new polling shows that 51% of voters say the former president plan to stay in office through illegal and unconstitutional means after the 2020 election. That's compared to 29% who say he attempted to hold on to power legally. Anthony Salvanto is our Director of Elections and Surveys and joins us now. Anthony, always great to see you. Tell us a little bit more about what voters are saying about former President Trump's indictment.
Hey there, Caitlin. So if you put those two items you just read together, those who think he tried to stay through illegal means and those who think he tried to stay through legal means, and we'll unpack those in a second, that's the majority of the country that does think they witness a president trying to stay in office. And because of that, this isn't just a window into his actions, it's a window into what the public thinks of how democracy is working. Let me show you why. With these 51% who think he tried to do it through illegal or unconstitutional means, they see these indictments now as upholding the rule of law. But the folks who say that he tried by legal means, well, the bulk of them, as with the bulk of Republicans, they also think that the 2020 election was conducted fraudulently. They're buying that disproven narrative that the former president has been talking about. And so that underpins the why of why they see it this way. And so in both those cases, you start to understand how the public sees this into that window on how democracy is working, Caitlin.
Yeah, Anthony, what about the legitimacy of the 2020 election? I mean, it's so fascinating to me that we're 3 years past that, and we are just now getting some Republican candidates like Ron DeSantis acknowledging that Trump lost the election, which we all know to be the case. But what are voters saying about the legitimacy of the election?
Yeah, I think that's going to be fascinating going forward in the campaign, too, because the other component of this, Caitlin, is what they see as political motivation, right? You see this big number here of 71% of Republicans that think the indictment is politically motivated. Well, that's, first of all, comparable to what we saw in the last indictment. So there's a narrative that's really taken hold here. You heard it from some of those sounds from voters that you played at the top of the segment, where once they think that the indictment is politically motivated, it becomes very hard then for anybody else, at least from what we've seen, to break through in criticizing the president, which most Republican voters tell us they don't want anybody to do.
We see that in their campaign strategies, at least at this point as well. Anthony Salvanto, thank you so much for this. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
And Republican leadership on Capitol Hill has been steadfast in their criticism of Attorney General Merrick Garland. But next, we'll talk to a Democratic congressman who thinks that Garland hasn't risen to the occasion. You're streaming America Decides.
If it's important to our nation,
I wonder how you think about where America is at this moment.
it's on Face the Nation.
Can there be stability if Vladimir Putin remains in power?
Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan on CBS.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education. Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News streaming.
Welcome to America Decides.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
I always tell people that Twitter would not be Twitter without Black Twitter. It's just us being in fellowship with each other.
And it becomes a conversation you don't want to be left out of.
People really started to recognize the power of activism on Twitter.
Based on that one tweet, the hashtag #OscarSoWhite was trending around the world.
If anything has really powered Black Twitter, it's been humor.
If your food ain't right, we're going to tell you about that, too.
We tend to create change, create culture and cool.
That's how movements happen on Black Twitter and go beyond more than that.
Black Twitter, the Twitterverse that changed a generation. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
when weather turns extreme.
The threat of severe weather and dangerous tornadoes is expected to last.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bringing virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Let's bring in our partners at the Weather Channel.
Now 6 feet of water, imagine that. Cars that can act like battering rams.
These hyper-realistic simulations show you what the weather will look and feel like before it happens.
Feel the forecast, streaming on CBS News.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
The carnage in our nation's schools has become painfully repetitive.
Now one more child!
School shootings have parents fighting mad.
I promised my daughter I was going to fight. It's going to keep on happening.
And teachers taking lessons in how to fight back.
This is an exercise.
We approach it as it's you or them.
It shouldn't have to be your teacher's job to protect your life.
But will the battle over gun control,
People are afraid that they're going to lose their gun rights altogether.
be the hardest lesson of all?
The exercise, you're having to shoot at an adult. Are you prepared to have to kill one of your students?
Guns in the Classroom, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She's the most successful alpine skier, male or female, ever, and a worldwide inspiration.
We need a lot of women doing sports really, really well.
The story of Michaela Schifrin's game-changing reign at the top of the slopes when we go person to person.
Mr. Smith and his team of experienced principled career agents and prosecutors have followed the facts and the law wherever they lead.
Welcome back to America Decides. That was Attorney General Merrick Garland last week addressing Special Counsel Jack Smith's investigation into Donald Trump and the Capitol riot. While many Republicans have been very critical of Garland, so too have some Democrats. Congressman Brendan Boyle tweeted in part, quote, "Thank you, Speaker Pelosi, for creating the House January 6th committee. If it were up to just the weak and feckless Merrick Garland and Lisa Monaco, then today would have never happened." And Pennsylvania Democratic Congressman Brendan Boyle joins us now. Hi, Congressman. Good to see you. Thanks for being here. So obviously your criticisms of the Attorney General are very different from what Republicans are saying. But what do you think that Garland should have done differently?
Well, thanks for having me on. My comments are based on public reporting, including a bombshell investigation by the Washington Post that was published in June that revealed that Merrick Garland and Lisa Monaco explicitly opposed and would not authorize an investigation into the main ringleaders responsible for the attack on our Capitol on January 6th. And it wasn't until at least 15 months had gone by and the House of Representatives had uncovered a great amount of information through its select committee on January 6th. It wasn't until after that happened, some 15 months later, that finally Garland switched and relented and authorized the investigation that ultimately has culminated in these indictments. Now, since Jack Smith has been on the job, which has only been for about 9 or 10 months now, he has worked at remarkable speed. It was greatly helped by just the remarkable work of the January 6th House Select Committee. But frankly, if we don't get a resolution to these criminal cases before next November, we'll look back at that wasted 15 months as having been critical.
But on that, intervening time, I mean, you have public trust in the Department of Justice and the FBI is, historically low. We've seen all those numbers, and you can see the rhetoric. Do you think that they just had to let these investigations play out? I mean, the January 6th committee played out in public view.
So my point was that without the January 6th Select Committee, frankly, I don't think we are here. Garland opposed investigating at the DOJ, investigating Donald Trump, as well as the other ringleaders. I argue that would be like if in Watergate, it was only the actual burglars who were investigated and were prosecuted. Now, I am grateful, tremendously grateful for the work that the House Select Committee did on January 6th. It is because of the number of incriminating things they found that I think it was that ultimately that forced the hand of Merrick Garland to finally at last approve launching a criminal investigation into the former president.
And now, again, I know your criticisms are very, very different from Republicans. I mean, Republicans have called for Garland's impeachment. I'm curious what your response is to them.
Well, that is laughable. I mean, frankly, as the investigation by the Washington Post showed, and I believe others have reported, Garland absolutely did not want Donald Trump to be investigated. It was only when so many facts and so much evidence had come out, when so many, frankly, younger Republican staffers in the White House bravely stepped forward and gave their testimony about what exactly happened, that at that point, Garland could no longer ignore it. The reality is, though, that ultimately launching the criminal investigations into the ringleaders of January 6th, especially including Donald Trump, was the right decision. I'm glad that DOJ's top leadership finally arrived at what was the right decision. I just hope that 15-month delay won't prove to be critical as we try to get this done before the November election.
And speaking of that November election, I know you are a strong ally of President Biden. I know you and I have talked in Iowa when you were campaigning for him back 4 years ago. But your Democratic colleague, Dean Phillips, has been laying out a case for Biden to be challenged in the primary, saying that competition is good. He was on Face the Nation over the weekend, encouraging a primary challenge. What's your response to that? Is there any validity to that argument that the president should be challenged?
Well, first, Caitlin, as you remember and mentioned, that's right. I was out very early for Joe Biden back in 2019. I was out there in Iowa, including knocking on doors personally. I did a great job, obviously. We finished fourth in Iowa. Did a little bit better toward the end of 2020 when we won my home state of Pennsylvania by a narrow margin, which, of course, is what ultimately put Joe Biden into the White House. Now, Dean is a colleague and a good friend. Where I disagree with him is the history of the last 40 years is not positive when we see an incumbent president challenged in a primary by an opponent within his own party. Just look at Jimmy Carter and Ted Kennedy in 1980, or Jerry Ford and Ronald Reagan in 1976, or George Herbert Walker Bush and Pat Buchanan in 1992. All three are examples of an incumbent president challenged with their own party, ultimately won the nomination, but went on to lose the general election to the nominee of the opposite party. I do not want to see that happen in 2024.
And it looks like it could be a very tight election. A poll just last week, New York Times Siena poll, showed Biden and Trump in a potential matchup neck and neck. I know we have a long way to go before then, and I'm sure we'll see you out on the campaign trail in that intervening time. But Congressman Brendan Boyle, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And less than a week after Donald Trump's third indictment, his legal team is already bracing for a fourth. We'll catch you up to speed on what's happening in Georgia next. You're streaming America Decides.
An original documentary from CBS reports. Controversial Congressman George Santos.
Why won't you answer our questions?
How did he manage to get elected?
Thank you very much, and God bless you, and God bless the USA.
George Santos' campaign was a campaign of deceit, lies, fabrication.
And who is he, really?
I knew him as Anthony DeVolder from Queens.
Really, who he is, he's a fraud.
I compare him to the Tinder swindler.
From people who know him, the truth, the facts, the lies.
He would say that he was worth $100 million.
It's an incredibly cynical episode in American politics, beyond satire.
Had you ever seen anything like this?
No, and I hope I never see it again.
Campaign of Deceit, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She dazzled on the court and off the court as a businesswoman.
Thank you for joining us on Person to Person. Tennis superstar and entrepreneur Serena Williams.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
I asked my students, what are we going to do about racism in the United States?
The backlash over teaching about racism in American schools.
I don't think it has any place in the classroom.
We can either pretend and say, no, we're not racist and we're all great people, or we can actually start to do the really, really hard work of addressing it.
How did you lose
lose your job. I made the statement that white privilege is a fact.
Is it helping diversity and inclusion?
When you bring in different people's stories and experience, it enriches education.
If you don't talk about something, it doesn't go away.
Or driving us further apart?
What schools are doing to our children in the name of anti-racism is in fact teaching them racism.
The intention is to put us in this war against each other.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
I was entitled to equal pay for equal work under the law.
Does the Supreme Court's power need to be checked?
9 Supreme Court justices, 5 of them said no, she's not entitled. That's not right.
Calls to fix the court tend to go along with the politics of the moment.
Republican-appointed justices have all tended to go in one direction, with the Democratic-appointed justices tending to go in another.
Even though it's only 9 justices, it takes 5 of them to make the law of the land.
Does it have political impact? True. Political intent? Probably not true.
If the American people don't trust the judgment of their court, that's a real problem for our democracy.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now.
On our places, bright shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Welcome back to America Decides. As we mentioned at the top, President Trump's attorneys are asking for a much narrower protective order from the special counsel's office. They're arguing that only genuinely sensitive material should be shielded from public view. In their filing, they also accuse President Biden of doing the same thing on social media. Now, let's get to another legal case hanging over the former president. CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian joins us now from Atlanta, where new state charges could be looming for former President Trump. Hey, Nicole, good to see you. I'm glad that you're here to break this all down because all of these investigations can get kind of confusing here. But what exactly are we expecting, at least, in the charges against Trump in Georgia?
Well, I think it's a little premature to speculate just yet in the sense that, A, we don't even have a charging decision. We do know we are nearing that window in the sense that you can probably see behind me there are barricades that have been set up. And while there were some set up last week, now the street outside of the courthouse is officially closed down. So reading all of these tea leaves in terms of the increased and enhanced security and the declining foot traffic within the courthouse, that does suggest that we are getting closer to this period where we expect District Attorney Fani Willis to present her evidence to one of 2 grand juries. And we expect that could happen really in a matter of days, which is why you're seeing some of that stepped up security behind me. And of course, this all stems from the 2020 election. And this is an investigation that has spawned some 2.5 years, really diving deep into whether or not there was election interference here in the state of Georgia. Of course, we know that the former president had that call, that now infamous call with Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger asking him to find the votes. But this case runs much deeper than that. It also delves into this issue of false electors. It delves into potential breaches into voting equipment in rural Georgia County. So this remains a sprawling case. We know that the special purpose grand jury that was investigating all of this both last year and into the beginning part of this year did suggest that some of the witnesses may have committed perjury. So that's one potential avenue. There has been a lot of speculation that the district attorney could move forward with racketeering charges because she has done that in the past with big, sprawling cases. So it remains to be seen. But, Caitlin, what we do know is that a decision is looming and looming soon.
And we're hearing also that the former lieutenant governor has received a subpoena in this inquiry. What does that tell us?
Well, it's significant because he is one of several individuals that has now been called to appear before the grand jury here in Fulton County. In addition to the lieutenant governor, for instance, we know that an independent journalist has also been called to testify who stumbled into these fake electors as they were meeting in the Georgia state capitol at the end of 2020. You know, in terms of the lieutenant governor, of course, his testimony could be significant in the sense that, you'll recall that the former president really mounted this pressure campaign allegedly here in Georgia, not only calling the Secretary of State, but also calling out the state's governor and other elected officials. And so to that extent, his testimony could prove valuable and be a part of the district attorney's presentation, although it's worth pointing out that the former lieutenant governor has been quite critical of the former president and remains so.
Indeed. Well, so much for a slow news August. Nicole Killion, I know you'll be covering all of this for us down in Georgia, and we'll see what unfolds there. Thank you for your time and reporting. And that does it for us today. You can stream America Decides Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You're streaming CBS News.
It's a history-making meeting. 4 extraordinary women who are all 4-star generals and admirals.
How did you deal with being discriminated